Coming up next weekend is going to be one of the best fight night cards of the year. It's going to be UFC Austin Dariush versus Tsarukyan, and I am really looking forward to this card. I mean, there's 14 fights on the card. That's a lot of fights, and on top of that, you've got some really good fighters on the card as well. Some ranked fighters, some young up-and-comers, some veterans, some legends, and on top of all of that, a lot of these fights are quite well made, match made, so I think there's going to be a lot of finishes and a lot of exciting fights as well in front of a crowd. It just doesn't really get too much better than this for a fight night. This is really good stuff from the UFC, and I'm really looking forward to this card. Before we do get into my predictions for every single fight on the card, you do have a couple links to sites that I am affiliated with, BetUS and BetOnline, in the description below, as well as my 3-day free trial code ARTEM for We Want Picks, where it's $10 per month, but you get access to so much. There's so many people giving different content on that website, as well as premium tools to help you make your own bets. 3-day free trial, cancel at any time. You can cancel during that 3-day period if you do sign up code using the code ARTEM. And now let's get into the first fight of the night. It is going to be Jamey-Lyn Horth taking on Veronica Hardy. Now, I was talking about how I think there's going to be a lot of finishes on the card. I feel like this one is quite likely to go the distance. I think this is going to mostly be a striking fight because both of these fighters are typically strikers. We did see a lot of grappling out of Veronica Hardy, and that was her first fight in years when she took on Juliana Miller. And hindsight is 2020. In hindsight, Juliana Miller just isn't that great. Now, yes, Hardy looked really good against Miller after 3 years away, so I do give her a lot of credit for that. But I think we're going to find out with this matchup here if Veronica Hardy really has made a lot of improvements over the years and how good she really is, because I actually think that Jamey-Lyn Horth is a pretty good fighter, and at 125 pounds as well, I know she's almost 34 years old, but I could see Jamey-Lyn Horth, having quite a bit of success in this weight class. She's going to be quite big for 125. She fought at 135 on very short notice against Hailey Cowan. Won a decision there. Honestly, didn't look too much smaller compared to Hailey Cowan. And when she was fighting Hailey Cowan's quite big for 135. I was thinking, man, if we see Horth at 125, she's going to be pretty big for the weight class. I think she's going to look quite big for the weight class against Hardy. If you do look at Horth, she is a pretty rangy striker. She doesn't go for takedowns at all. And she does have she's got good length. She can throw kicks from range. She can throw straight punches from range. And she throws a lot of volume. And I think that volume could overwhelm Veronica Hardy, who is a very technical striker herself and showed off some good wrestling and grappling in her game in her last fight against Juliana Miller. I am going to pick Horth to win this fight by keeping it on the feet if Hardy does go for takedowns. And on top of that as well, I do think that Horth will be throwing more volume, will be landing more volume, and I think I can just trust her to just land more and throw more over 3 rounds. So I'm going to pick her to win the fight. It's a close fight though, and I could be proven wrong. We really could see Hardy go out there and get a win, and maybe Hardy really has made those big improvements in her game. And now we've got Wellington Turman taking on Jared Gooden. I mean, this one could finish in multiple different ways. Jared Gooden does have good power on the feet. He went on a pretty nice little run after the UFC, fought for XMMA, which is a great promotion. I mean, they live stream on YouTube, and their cards are very good, like very well match-made cards. I believe they had Saeed Yokub Kakramonov on their last card, for example. And Jared Gooden was on a couple as well. He beat Curtis Melinda, former UFC fighter there. But then he lost to Impa Kasanganai, who is potentially going to be a PFL champion sometime soon. Not a bad loss. And then beat a couple of other guys, that did have decent records. Short notice replacement against Carlson Harris. Didn't look very good in that fight. In fact, both guys didn't look very good in that fight, to be honest with you. They both look like pretty sloppy strikers. Now, Wellington Turman recently come down to 170 to take on Randy Brown. And he had a much better showing than I personally anticipated, because when I think of Wellington Turman, I think of a grappler, I think of a guy that wants to get the fight down to the ground, and I also think of a guy that doesn't really have the best chin. He has been KO'd twice, but he got KO'd by Bruno Silva, which is, that happens, but he got KO'd by Andrew Sanchez. And, like 2 KO losses in a row, 2020, 2021. But now he's turned it around quite a bit. Now he's at 170. I thought he looked quite good against Randy Brown at 170. He probably will be trying to get takedowns on Jared Gooden, but his striking's been looking a bit better. He's training with Glover Teixeira. He'll be training with Alex Pereira as well, so he'll be getting some really good striking training in with Pereira. He'll be getting that grappling and wrestling in with Teixeira, and just the team that they do have going on there. I do like Turman to win the fight. Very low confidence pick again. There are quite a few low confidence picks for me on the card. I'm going to go with Turman. I'm going to go with him to win by decision, but we do have some finishes coming up, and this fight here is definitely going to be a finish. It's Ihor Potieria taking on Rodolfo Bellato, and I'm going to pick Rodolfo Bellato, but what I'm going to say next could be either a lot of fact or it could be a lot of cope, because I am not sold on Rodolfo Bellato at all, to be honest with you. He's a wrestler grappler, but when he gets his wrestling going, his fights are not very fun at all. If you watch his fight against Acacio dos Santos, he's getting booed out of the arena. That fight was terrible. And then he goes out there against Murtaza Talha, and it turns out Murtaza Talha had surgery like 4 months ago on his leg, and Talha did not look anything near what he looked like on tape, and he did beat Talha. And that's where the cope comes in, because I really think that Murtaza Talha is a really good fighter, and Bellato did beat him. So I am coping quite a bit there. But stylistically, for Bellato, this is a fight that he should really try and get down to the ground, because I don't consider Bellato to be that great at striking. I do consider him to be a decent grappler and a decent wrestler at 205. And Ihor Potieria could be taken down by me, probably. I mean, Ihor Potieria's takedown defense is shockingly bad. He's got absolutely no grappling whatsoever. And on the feet, he's also got no technique whatsoever as well. If you watch his fight on Dana White's Contender Series, he literally runs forward against Lucas Sadolski, who is a very slow starter, and he's just throwing bombs over and over again. He's just running forward and just sprinting forward with no care in the world, and just swinging and landing. Now recently though, I will say he has slowed down a lot, but I don't know if that's going to be really the best thing depending on the matchup. And against Rodolfo Bellato, I think Potieria's best chance is just to go out there and try and knock him out in 90 seconds, to be honest with you, because otherwise Bellato's just going to take him down and probably submit him. So the pick is Bellato by submission, but if Potieria knocked him out, I would not be that surprised. I don't think Bellato's striking is that great. I don't think Bellato's that great in general, but Ihor Potieria's grappling is just so bad. I think Bellato gets it done. I think he gets it done by submission. A lot of people picking Bellato by KO, but if you do look at his record, he does have a lot of KOs, but he's got a lot of submissions as well. He is more of a grappler. I'm going with Bellato by submission in this one here. Now we've got Steve Garcia taking on Melquizael Costa. I'm going with Costa. I'm going with Costa by KO, and probably in the first, maybe second round. Melquizael Costa is a very, very good Muay Thai striker. We saw it in his last fight where he just pieced up Austin Lingo for 3 rounds. Looked really good in that fight. And he didn't look bad against Thiago Moises in moments, because in that fight on the feet, whenever the fight was on the feet, upper weight class, on short notice, we saw the Costa look pretty good. Now, he did get out-grappled by Moises. He did get submitted in the second round, but he had quite a bit of success in round number 1. My issue with Steve Garcia is his chin. Steve Garcia's chin is terrifying to me. If I was picking Steve Garcia, I would be concerned, because if you watch Steve Garcia, gets dropped, gets hurt by Shayla Nurdembiki, goes against Chase Hooper, absolutely dominates Chase Hooper, so we can kind of X that one out here and what I'm trying to say. Gets KO'd stiff with a right hand from Mahashate. Charlie Ontiveros knocked him down twice. This guy's chin terrifies me. I don't think that Steve Garcia has a very good chin. I think if Steve Garcia wants to win this fight, he probably has to wrestle. I do understand that Steve Garcia's striking has actually looked much better in his last 2 fights than it has throughout his entire career. So we'll give him a lot of credit. He's making rapid improvements. But at the end of the day, Melquizael Costa is a really, really good, aggressive Muay Thai fighter. He does fight out of a shooter box gym, not the shooter box gym with Diego Lima, but he's a shooter box guy, aggressive Muay Thai fighter, very technical on the feet. He's a fun fighter, he's fun to watch, and I do believe that he's going to knock out Steve Garcia. Steve Garcia's chin is terrifying to me. I think that Costa knocks him out. Garcia can have success in his own right, but I do like Costa in this matchup, and I don't really like him a lot, but I'm relatively confident he gets the KO, if that makes any sense. Now we've got Solecki taking on Drakkar Klose. I mean, this just comes down to quite a lot of things. That doesn't make sense. Well, what I'm going to try and say is I think that Drakkar Klose is going to be the much better striker here, but I will say that Solecki's had a very underrated run at 155 pounds, because you don't go 5-1 in the UFC in one of the best weight classes that the UFC has to offer at 155. You don't go 5-1 in that weight class in your run, and he's gone 5-1 at 155 relatively unnoticed as well, which is kind of crazy because he has beaten some pretty good guys on that run. He did beat Austin Hubbard, who was on the Ultimate Fighter recently. He did beat Jim Miller, and Jim Miller has been turning around some pretty good young prospects recently. Lost to Jared Gordon, sent Alex de Silva to, I believe he fights now for Brave CF or UAE Warriors, one of the two. Maybe it's Aries as well. He's fighting around the place. He's fighting for UAE. And he beat Carl Deaton the third, but Deaton took that on short notice. Now, Drakkar Klose recently just beat up Brandon Jenkins, like, pretty badly. I think Jenkins took that on short notice. That was Drakkar Klose's first fight in a long time as well. Dominated Jenkins, looked good in that fight. Jenkins showed a good chin, but he just wasn't the level of Klose at all. And then he beat Huffer Garcia, and Huffer Garcia is a good boxer-wrestler. Drakkar Klose is going to be the better striker in this matchup here because Solecki is a grappler. He is a guy that does get submissions pretty early on in his fights as well, so he has gone on a pretty good run with quite a few finishes. But at the end of the day, Klose is going to be much better at striking. He does have a wrestling background. If Klose chooses to keep this fight on the feet, if he can defend all of the takedowns, all of the attempts for Solecki to get the fight down to the ground, I think you can piece up Solecki on the feet. I like Klose here. I like Klose by decision, most likely. But I can see a KO happening as well. I've got Drakkar Klose. So does the majority of Tapology. And now we can move on to Cody Brundage taking on Zachary Reese. Zach Reese. I think Zach Reese is really, really good, man. And, like, I saw some people saying, like, I mean, I could be proven wrong. And I'm going to say this now before I do get a little bit too carried away. Whenever I get really, really high on a prospect from Dana White's Contender Series, they tend to lose. Esteban Ridovic is the most recent example of this. He lost his UFC debut to Loic Radzhabov, and I was all over him, mate. Like, I was talking about this guy going far. I loved him. I think Zach Reese is one of those guys as well. I've got quite a few guys from the Contender Series this year that I think can go really far. I think Zach Reese is one of those guys. I'm seeing a lot of people, this is where I was kind of going, a lot of people were out there saying that Zach Reese, you know, isn't that great, he's not going to go far. No, I think they're wrong. I think Zach Reese is really good. If you look at him, though, there are a couple pretty major red flags in not really the worst way. That red flag is that he's won every single fight he's ever been in round number 1, as a professional, that is, and he hasn't been a pro for very long either. So he is lacking a lot of experience, but if you watch his fights, man, this guy knows what he's doing. He seems to be quite technical for the weight class. He's massive for the weight class. He's 6'4". He's a technical striker. He's aggressive. He's a really good grappler. He submitted Aaron Phillips, who was on the Ultimate Fighter season 29, I think, in 33 seconds with a guillotine, I think it was. Dominated a 5-10 opponent, which happens. You know, he hasn't beaten the best guys. And then he takes on Eli Aronov, and Eli Aronov is having success, but he just gave up an armbar, and Zach Reese went for it. I think a similar situation is going to happen in this matchup here. Brundage is a really good fighter, and he does have good wrestling. He does have decent boxing. His striking's not that great, but he keeps saying in interviews that this next fight, I'm going to show off my striking. I'm going to show it off. And then he pulls guillotine and looks like an idiot. He did that against Rodriguez Demars. Did that against Rodolfo Vieira, which is why he lost. And he was losing to Jacob Malkoon. Now, people do clown on Cody Brundage for this, but to be honest with you, that was an illegal elbow. Like, why was Jacob Malkoon throwing an elbow in that position? It was just dumb. That's not the strike. That is not the strike to throw in that situation. I don't blame Brundage at all for kind of milking the situation, saved his UFC career. But he's run into Zach Reese, and as I said, Zach Reese 6-0, 6 wins in the first round. Seems to be a very technical striker from the very limited tape you can see, because his fights don't last long. He's a very good grappler. You know, he throws up submissions. Submitted Eli Aronov, who's a really good fighter himself, and a really good wrestler. I think we see Zach Reese go out there, man, and get a round 1 finish over Brundage, where it's by KO or by submission. I think Reese is the real deal. I mean, the thing about Reese, though, is we need to see him go 3 rounds. We need to see him go into the second round, third round. We haven't seen any... He's never seen adversity in his career. This guy is just that good. But at the same time, he's that good fighting guys that aren't as good as him. Realistically, let's be honest. But let's find out. Let's see how good he is. Let's see if he can kind of just beat Cody Brundage in round 1 like he's beating everybody else. Now we've got Miesha Tate taking on Julia Avila. Or Julia Avila, sorry. I mean, I'm just going to pick Julia Avila because I'm fading Miesha Tate. I think Miesha Tate recently, I know she'd made that big comeback after like 5 years away. Her last 2 fights, she's looked really, really bad. She looks terrible against Ketlen Vieira. Absolutely terrible on the feet. She showed up using this... Watch the fight. Because she shows up using, honestly, the funniest karate stance I've ever seen. And she looks like she's got absolutely no idea what she's doing. It's actually hilarious. And then she takes on Lauren Murphy and she gets out-wrestled by Lauren Murphy somehow. Like, what is Miesha Tate doing, man? Like, I just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. Tate does have a wrestling background. I believe that she wrestled with the guys in high school, or maybe it was college. So she's got really good wrestling, I think. I don't know what the situation was that kind of led to that, but she wrestled like with the guys in high school or college. I believe it was college. She's got a wrestling base, but she got out wrestled by Lauren Murphy, who took up MMA like 10 years ago or something like that, which is just nuts. And then Julia Avila has taken years away because I believe she had a kid recently. I don't think she was injured, and I don't think she had a suspension. I think she had a kid. If you look at her Instagram, you can see her posting things like that. Now, she did beat Julia Stoliarenko by submission. Relatively well-aging win, if you can believe it. She did lose to Sijara Eubanks, but Eubanks, beats some really good fighters and loses to some fighters. She just hasn't fought in years. This is a Tate fade pick for me. Honestly, this isn't anything aside from that. I just think Miesha Tate's looked terrible in her last couple of fights. And if Julia Avila shows up with like at least a tiny bit of improvement, she should be able to win the fight. Julia Avila is a black belt in BJJ. She doesn't go for takedowns super often, but she can get them. I don't know if she'll be able to get Tate down because Tate does have good wrestling, but she's a decent striker as well, Avila. She lands more strikes than she absorbs. I think she should be able to go out there and outstrike Tate, especially if Miesha shows up with that karate stance. I'm going with Avila to win by decision. I mean, this fight's going the distance most likely. Let's just move on to Clay Guida taking on Joaquim Silva, where we've got 2 guys that, are relatively old at 155. One of them much more so than the other. Clay Guida is almost 42 years old, and he's still out here doing it, man, and he's looking good. He's getting wins over Scott Holtzman, who's a very old guy himself. I think he was like 39 at the time, but Holtzman's a good fighter. And lost to Claudio Puelles, but Puelles, that's not a good loss. Beat Leonardo Santos, who's like 42. So to be fair, when Clay Guida's winning, he's beating the other older guys in the division. Joaquim Silva is an older guy, but he's not super old. He recently had that crazy performance against Arman Tsarukyan where he did lose. He did take a lot of damage towards the end, but he had Arman in some trouble. He hit Arman with some good shots on the feet. He was surprisingly good at defending the takedowns from Arman Tsarukyan as well, and just gave Arman Tsarukyan a pretty tough fight. Now, to be fair though, in hindsight, a lot of guys at 155 are good. Everyone at 155 is really good. That's a really good weight class. And I guess maybe Arman Tsarukyan was just a little bit thrown off by how good Silva was. But to be fair, in the past, Silva hasn't really looked that good. I was going to say he beat Jesse Ronson by KO, but he wasn't looking that good against Jesse Ronson. And before that, he was on a 2-fight losing streak by KO. Clay Guida is a wrestler. That's what he does, and that's kind of all he does. If Silva wants to win this fight, he's going to have to defend a lot of takedowns from Clay Guida, because Guida's going to keep coming and shooting for takedowns over and over again. But even then, if he does get taken down, Silva does have pretty good BJJ. He does have the ability to throw up submissions, put Guida in some bad positions. Guida's going to try and keep the fight against the cage, I would guess. But I think Silva will have a lot of success on the feet. He's got really good kicks. I think he can have success against Guida on the feet. At the end of the day, Guida's taken a lot of damage in his career, but he just keeps on coming forward, man. But Silva's taken a lot of damage too. He's been KO'd a few times. I think he's been submitted as well. But The point is, I'm going to go with Silva. I'm going to go with Silva by decision. Yes, he did give Tsarukyan some problems. Yes, he did hurt Tsarukyan on the feet. But Guida's a tough guy, man. Like, I know Guida's been finished before, but he's a tough guy. Silva does hit pretty hard, but I think it's going to go the distance. And I think we're going to see Silva get his hand raised. Now we move on to the main card. 6-fight main card. Don't see these all of the time, but this is going to be a ranked fight at 205 pounds. Khalil Rountree taking on Azamat Mirzakhanov. Very good fight. I've got Mirzakhanov though, and the reason why is because I've got Mirzakhanov because he can mix it up more. He can wrestle and he can strike, whereas Khalil Rountree really can only strike. Rountree does not go for takedowns. I don't think he's ever got a takedown in his entire UFC career, so he only strikes. But my goodness, can he hit hard? He's a very good Muay Thai fighter. Got crazy power. Recently put on a pretty good win streak. You know, beats a couple good guys. Knocked out Dalkaus, who hasn't done that at this point. I know it was at 205 though. Beat Jacoby. So did Mirzakhanov in a pretty close fight. And he also beat Karl Roberson. Roberson, former Glory kickboxer, if I do recall correctly. Good win. And Bukowskis. Sent Bukowskis out of the UFC and then back into it because Bukowskis is now back and having some mixed success in the UFC in the second run. So well-aging win there. I like Mirzakhanov though. Mirzakhanov can strike. Now, I do think his striking might be a little bit overrated because he does find himself in a lot of trouble against strikers. But he looked really, really good on the feet against Dustin Jacoby. And I could not believe it because I picked Dustin Jacoby with not a lot of confidence, but enough confidence but a decent amount of confidence because I thought that Dustin Jacoby was just going to be able to control the striking against Mirzakhanov. And kind of the opposite really happened. Mirzakhanov had a lot of success on the feet in that fight. Jacoby made a little bit of a rally towards the end, but Mirzakhanov was having his way with Jacoby. He was landing some big shots on Jacoby. Jacoby just couldn't figure him out, couldn't get it going. I was surprised. I was quite shocked. He KO'd Devin Clark. Pretty good win there. I mean, that was the fight, I believe, where his dad, Devin Clark's dad, was going crazy in the corner. That was quite funny. But Mirzakhanov's had bad performances. You know, he didn't look that good against Tough One and Chukwi. Got the third round KO. Needed that third round KO to get it done. I mean, Rountree could win this fight. I could see Rountree winning this fight for sure. But Mirzakhanov, he can wrestle. And if he chooses to wrestle, that's how I think he gets it done. So I'm going to go with Mirzakhanov to win this fight. Relatively low confidence pick, but I like the fact that he can mix it up, whereas Rountree can't. So I'm going to go with Mirzakhanov for that reason. Just occurring to me now that I think I might have picked every favorite on the card, but I've picked so many underdogs the last few weeks, so I guess it comes around. I mean, as I said, I don't make picks based on odds. I just pick who I think is going to win. And I think Punahele Soriano wins this fight here against Dustin Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus says, I'm glad Stoltzfus is getting another fight, but man, I think there's easier fights for him than this one. You know, I know Punahele is 1-3. He's kind of become pillow hands Punahele recently. He hasn't really been KOing everybody. I mean, he KO'd Dolce, but that's Dolce Languambola, and he needed that. You know, he couldn't KO. Who could he not KO? Was it Brendan Allen and Maximov he couldn't KO? Those two guys, yes. But anyway, Dustin Stoltzfus taking on Punahele Soriano. Stoltzfus, I think, is going to get KO'd here. Now, Stoltzfus is a grappler, and he can wrestle, and Punahele Soriano's takedown defense is not that great, considering the fact that he does have a wrestling background. So Stoltzfus could get it down to the ground, and that's what he needs to do. Stoltzfus needs this fight down. He needs to try and out-grapple Punahele, but on the feet, Punahele is powerful. He's not super technical, but he's relatively technical. And another thing that I will point out about Punahele is this guy always ends up on the main card of big fight nights or pay-per-views or something. Like, he always ends up in the spotlight card. Like, the UFC must love this guy. This guy's got dirt on Dana White. I mean, if you actually look through his career, I'm pretty confident Punahele's been in the main card or like co-main event of like a lot of these fights recently, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I think Punahele Soriano comes out there. I think he gets back on his winning ways, because at one point, before he did lose to Brendan Allen, we were talking about Punahele Soriano going pretty far and maybe making a good run into the rankings, but that momentum's just been completely stopped. I think he can get back onto it. I think he can beat Dustin Stoltzfus and then maybe try and launch another run himself. Give me Punahele Soriano. I think he knocks out Stoltzfus. I'm glad Stoltzfus gets another opportunity, because I was kind of worried that after he lost to Abus Magomedov, that was going to be it for him. But you know, he took on Abus Magomedov, and we didn't know that Abus Magomedov was that good. Now, here's the thing about Abus. He's got no cardio, he's got no heart, but he is still a really good fighter at the end of the day. And Stoltzford took him on, got KO'd in 20 seconds, but unfortunately that does happen every now and then. Sean Brady is taking on Kelvin Gastelum. I've got an underdog. Okay, Gastelum is the underdog. I thought Gastelum was the favorite. I am picking Kelvin Gastelum in this fight, and it kind of comes down to one big thing. The Renzo Gracie Philly fade is real, man. Like, I mean, these guys striking are terrible. All of them. None of them can strike. Every single fighter at this gym cannot strike. I don't know what's going on. I mean, apparently Ruzabo's training there. That's actually mad if that's true. Jeremiah Wells, is he a technical striker? Absolutely not. Andre Petrosky, all he does is spam hooks and misses most of the time. Pat Sabatini cannot strike to save his life. Just got smoked by Diego Lopez. Sean Brady just got KO'd by Belal Muhammad. Now, shout out to that guy in my comments commenting about Belal. It is hilarious, man. I do love it. But in this fight, Sean Brady took on Belal. And to be honest with you, he actually was having decent success on the feet. That fight was a fight that took place on the feet. Now, Brady was trying to get it down to the ground, but he just couldn't do it. And then he got hurt with a big shot, and he just crumbled, man. He gave up. It looked like he gave up. It looked like he didn't know what to do. And Kelvin Gastelum is going to have more success on the feet against Sean Brady than Belal Muhammad did if this is a pure striking matchup. Now, Gastelum is moving down to 170 for the first time in a long time. He's finally put the buffet down. Good for you, Gastelum, man. If Gastelum comes in here looking skinny, he's going to have to motivate your boy to try and lose a bit of weight. Because I was like for ages trying to lose weight to go down a weight class in boxing. Yeah, I'll plug it again. I had my first amateur boxing fight just about a month ago, and I won at heavyweight. But I'm trying to go down, man. I'm trying to go down. But anyway, Sean Brady, though, I mean, his grappling's phenomenal, but do I think he can get it down to the ground? I'm going to say no. And even then, Kelvin Gastelum's grappling is really, really good. He has a wrestling and grappling base. That is how he come up. That's how he won the Ultimate Fighter all those years ago with John Jones as his coach. And he beat Uriah Hall. And Uriah Hall at that point was an absolute beast. And he beat Hall to win it all. And I think that we see Kelvin Gastelum go out there, keep the fight on the feet against Sean Brady. And I think he can outbox and outstrike Brady, who just isn't a good striker, who's a quitter, who just doesn't have heart, man. Gastelum, all Gastelum needs to do is land a couple good shots on Brady, and he's going to fold. He's going to quit. So I'm going to go with Gastelum. I'm going to go with Gastelum by KO. Brady showed that he's a quitter in his last fight, and I cannot trust a guy who's going to quit, a guy who has no heart, a guy who's no will to win. Gastelum has kind of shown that he doesn't really care on the past, but he's back. He's back. So let's see how that goes. Now we've got Rob Font taking on Davison Figueiredo. I don't want to do it because there's so many reasons why I shouldn't do this, but I am going to pick Rob Font here. And in fact, I'm going to go out and say this. I think this is a fight that you actually just shouldn't bet on. I think you should just go out there and enjoy this fight. I think that Davison Figueiredo is not going to find the success that he thinks he can find at 135. When Davison Figueiredo said that he was going to be moving up to 135, I instantly thought, wow, that's a great thing. I'm really happy that he's going to be going and doing that. But now that it's happening, and he's fighting Rob Font as well, who stylistically, not even stylistically, just in general, is probably one of the best matchups that he could get in the top 10. I'm like, man, you know, maybe Figueiredo, maybe he can't really do it at 135. We're going to find out, because the way that Figueiredo fought at 125 was he really tried to use his size to outmuscle, to outpressure, to outpower a lot of opponents. And yes, I guess you could say he was fighting some pretty good technical fighters there, some guys that were more technical than a lot of the guys at 135, because 125 is an incredible weight class where all of the fighters are so technical. 135 is the same though, but the guys are a bit bigger, the guys are a bit more powerful. And you could say about Rob Font that, you know, he's felt the power of a lot of guys. Rob Font's an older guy now at 135. He's 36 and a half years old. He has been KO'd, I believe, recently. No, that's just wrong, Artem. He's never been KO'd. But one thing that I can say for a fact is Rob Font has taken a lot of damage in his career. Now, he's a tough guy. He's taken a lot of damage against some really good guys. Like Marlon Vera is a fight that I remember where Marlon Vera knocked him down, I believe, 3 times, maybe 4 times, in separate rounds to win that fight. Because if you watch that fight against Marlon Vera, Rob Font is outstriking him like 2-1. A lot. He's outstriking him a lot, but then Vera comes back at the end of the rounds with a big knockdown and almost finishes him. And he does that over and over and over again and ends up taking the decision from Rob Font. And then Rob Font comes back, looks really good against Yanez. And when Adrian Yanez goes out there and he just gets a little bit trigger happy, gets a little bit aggressive, and Rob Font times him, figures him out, knocks him out in round 1. Now, Yanez lost recently again, so maybe Adrian Yanez isn't as good as we thought he was, but I don't know. I'm not really willing to give up on Adrian Yanez just yet. But then he takes a chance, and I respect him for doing this because he took on Corey Sandhagen on quite short notice. I don't think it was ridiculously short notice, but it was still like 2-3 weeks notice, and because his fight against Song Yadong was cancelled, takes on Sandhagen, just gets out wrestled by Sandhagen. Boring fight, but apparently Sandhagen got injured in round 1, so this resorted to wrestling to winning the fight. Figueiredo, in my opinion, to win this fight is going to have to be super, super aggressive and mix in the wrestling and the grappling. But I think that Rob Font can outbox him, man. I think that Rob Font can try and keep his distance because he is going to be the bigger guy in there. We're going to see how big Figgy is at 135 because he was huge at 125. Maybe he's just not going to look huge at 135. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, but Font isn't a small guy for 135. I think that Font can box him up, keep, in safe striking range against Figgy. He does have the longer reach. I think he can have the eyes in the pocket to avoid the big shots Figgy's going to be swinging. And I think he can outpoint him to a 3-round decision on the feet. So give me Rob Font by decision in this one here. If Figgy gets it down to the ground, he's going to be working his grappling. It could be interesting. It's just going to be interesting to see how Figgy is at 135. Now we've got a big one for me, man. Dan Hooker taking on Bobby Green. If you guys know me, I am a big fan of Dan Hooker. He's probably one of the first fighters that got me into MMA, got me into the sport. I watched a live show in Auckland all those years ago, and that is where I was introduced to Dan Hooker, where he knocked out Ross Pearson in 2017. I was live, I was there. I would have been like 15 years old then, I think. Maybe 14, 15, 16 years old, kind of, quick math. And he knocks out Ross Pearson. And since then, I started following his career. And man, it's been an up and down. It's been up and down, I'll tell you that much. Because there was a lot of up for a long time. And then he gets smoked by Edson Barboza. Then he goes to 155, KOs James Vick. Goes out there, has a close fight against Felder. Now, I do think that he beat Felder. A lot of people think Felder won that fight. It's a close fight, man. It's a really, really close fight. Goes out there against Poirier, was seconds away from KOing him in round 2. And then Poirier mounts a massive comeback in 3, 4, and 5 and just lays on the damage. Takes on Chandler, gets KO'd by Chandler. And that's kind of where we are now in Dan Hooker's career. But he's coming back. He's making a comeback, boys. And he's looking pretty good doing it. Yes, he's taken a lot of damage in his career. But man, Dan Hooker still got it, you know. He showed that against Jalen Turner. I picked Jalen Turner in that one here. I thought Jalen Turner was going to absolutely smoke him. And Dan Hooker, hey, he showed off the chin, you know. He got hit with a massive head kick, and he kept going. Man, it was a good fight, and he beat Claudio Puelles because Puelles just had nothing for him on the feet, to be honest with you. And the people that picked Puelles to beat Hooker, I picked Hooker to beat Puelles. I didn't think Puelles was actually that great. And, man, people went out there and they picked Puelles, like you idiots. Yeah, I know hindsight's 2020. But I picked Hooker in that fight. So, hey. Anyways, taking on Bobby Green. I think Dan Hooker can beat Bobby Green, man. Like, he's got the longer reach in general. But the way that Dan Hooker fights is actually going to be a potentially difficult style for him against Bobby Green. Because I think Bobby Green actually can land quite a bit on Dan Hooker. The way that Dan Hooker fights is he fights with his very long kickboxing style. And he kind of relies on his length quite a lot. He throws a lot of kicks. Throws a lot of straight punches. He gets out of the way, got good eyes in the pocket. You know, he has been slowing it down a little bit recently. Throws a lot of kicks, throws a lot of punches, and can wrestle. Bobby Green can wrestle as well. And he just hasn't really wrestled recently. We've just seen a lot of boxing out of Bobby Green. But I think we're going to see Dan Hooker go out there and have a lot of success on the feet. I think we're going to see a lot of kicks from Dan. A lot of leg kicks from Dan. You know, he's got those new shin guards tattooed on his legs now. I think we're going to see him just kick the legs of Bobby Green quite a lot. Now, when the going does get tough with Bobby Green, and he does this all the time, he starts to play dirty, so you might see like some eye pokes and stuff like that, because he did that against Tony Ferguson, and when Tony Ferguson started to have success against him, pokes Tony Ferguson in the eye, headbutts Jared Gordon when the going gets tough, and then he just knocks out Grant Dawson. I mean, Grant Dawson, man, madness, to be honest with you. I think Bobby Green was in southpaw, and he threw like a straight left hand, knocked him out. Madness. And can't believe it happened, to be honest with you. But now it's led to this. This is a banger. It's 5 rounds as well. And because it's 5 rounds, I think Dan Hooker's going to play it a little bit safe. Dan Hooker could wrestle in this fight. If Dan Hooker goes out there and gets takedowns, don't be surprised. He did that against Jalen Turner to secure the win. I mean, I think Jalen Turner took the first round. Then Dan made a bit of a comeback, took the second round. And then Dan played it pretty safe in round 3 because I believe he broke his arm or something like that. Just got a takedown, controlled Turner on top for the whole round after that. I can see Dan Hooker going out there and wrestling Bobby Green, and Bobby Green not being too happy about it. The difference, though, between Dan Hooker and Grant Dawson is Dan Hooker can strike. Grant Dawson has absolutely no idea what he's doing on the feet and would probably lose a pure striking match to most fighters at 155. Dan Hooker, I think, can go out there, be very competitive with Bobby Green on the feet, if not beat him on the feet, and mix in the wrestling takedowns. I think we see Dan Hooker go out there, get a decision win, I want to say, over 5 rounds. Maybe a late KO. I mean, I can see a finish happening as well. Both these guys are pretty tough, though. Bobby Green has been KO'd before. Hooker does have power, but I'm going to go Dan Hooker to go out there and mix it up with the striking and the wrestling to a decision or late KO win. Now we've got Beneil Dariush taking on Arman Tsarukyan. We're going to learn a lot in this fight because we're going to learn something about Beneil and we're going to learn something about Arman depending on who wins. We're going to find out, was Beneil actually any good anyways? Or is Arman Tsarukyan truly the real deal as he's now coming into his prime? Because Beneil Dariush, I saw people saying this when he lost to Charlie Olives. Man, they were like, Beneil, he actually wasn't that great. Charlie Olives looked pretty good. Charlie Olives fought the perfect fight in that one there and knocked him out in the first round. But before that, you can't ignore the performance against Mateusz Gamrot. He looked really good against Gamrot, and I thought that Gamrot was like the nightmare matchup against Islam Makhachev at that point because Gamrot does have incredible wrestling. Now, obviously, we know that's not true because Islam Makhachev's striking is so good now, and we know that Islam Makhachev's wrestling is also obviously good. But I thought that the pure wrestling of Gamrot might have been able to overpower Islam Makhachev at that time. Obviously, now Makhachev's a different fighter. He's a much better striker now than he was at that point. But goes out there, beats what I thought was a pretty hard matchup for him and Makhachev, and looked really good doing it. Beat Tony Ferguson 2.5 years ago. You know, still Tony. It was a better Tony than we got now. And before that, beat a couple old guys because Scott Holtzman and Diego Ferreira were old at that point. Arman's good, man. Like, yes, he lost that controversial decision to Mateusz Gamrot, but since then, beat Damir Ismagulov, retired him, I think. I think Damir's done. And then he beat Joaquim Silva because nobody else would fight him in the rankings. Dustin Poirier, what are you doing? But now we've got this fight. This is the fight that was always going to be made because, as I said, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, they don't want to fight these guys. Charlie Olives would have done it, but Charlie Olives is now trying to get a fight in the title. So we've got Arman Tsarukyan versus Dariush. This is the fight to make. This was always the fight to make. I think Tsarukyan wins, though. I think Tsarukyan can get it done. I mean, Dariush is a decent striker, but I can see Tsarukyan going out there and getting the takedowns off Dariush. Dariush's scrambling ability is incredible, though. So I could see Dariush scrambling out of positions that Tsarukyan puts him in. I think Tsarukyan's the real deal, though, man. I think Tsarukyan goes out there. I think he can get the takedowns. I think he can control Beneil. Beneil is a former world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he does have the BJJ to put Tsarukyan in trouble. I mean, we're going to find out a lot in this fight. But I'm going to go with Arman. Low confidence pick, though, because I do respect Beneil, even though I have kind of been that guy saying that he doesn't deserve a title shot. People were saying Beneil should have got a title shot after he beat Ferguson. But before that, he beat Diego Ferreira and Scott Holtzman. And then he beat Mateusz Gamrot, and then people were campaigning for a title shot. And I was like, he beat Gamrot and Ferguson. That's kind of it, you know. Like, I know Charlie Olives did, but Olives was on a mega win streak at that point, though. And so was Dariush, but over Bahia and Holtzman. I mean, come on. Anyway, I've got Tsarukyan. I've got Tsarukyan to win. I think he does win by decision, but this is a very good fight, and I would not recommend putting money on this fight either in the main event. I think we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot about Tsarukyan. We're going to learn a lot about Beneil. And let me know what you think of my picks in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one. I was going to try and crank out heaps of content over the next few weeks or so. But I just started summer courses at university. And it is going to be a lot more busy than I expected. And on top of that as well, I'm trying to get really good at disc golf. As you guys may or may not know, I've been competing in disc golf recently, and now I'm gonna try and start taking it a bit more seriously, because I think I actually can, get a lot better than I am now, and then start being a bit more competitive in the competitive disc golf scene. Very small sport, very niche sport, but it's a lot of fun, man, and it's a growing sport as well. So kind of pretty happy to get into it now. But yeah. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.